Civil media.
Ilievski totally right. Macedonia is also undergoing these election processes with high level of conflict. This is nothing new. If we perceive, for example, the elections in Israel, in Turkey, European elections, Brexit, Trump, as if the world is at the edge. The investments in policy is huge, and it is somehow connected with the future of those who are losing or winning. Those who win everything, and those who lose everything. This is what the situation is in the world. I want to make an analysis and indicating that we have two sides in these elections, which have different investments from the both sides. On one side, we have the government, for which it is very important to win the elections, and which, even if they lose the presidential elections, nothing personal within the government structure will not be changed, and neither the leader of that government structure, Mr. Zaev, will sustain in a foreseeable future any problems in terms of his leadership position both in the country and in the political party. I think that that situation is mostly controlled by SDSM. That means Mr. Zaev, and the option for early elections will be a political decision, which will be made by the government, regardless of what the outcome would be from the presidential elections. And this is not the situation with the opposition, because the opposition has ambitions not only to win with the president, because they need the win to survive. They're undergoing a very complicated situation. Obviously, Mr. Mickoski is not controlling the entire political party or the political MPs group. They are undergoing very complex processes, court processes, and it is all somehow connected with what will happen in the court reforms, and therefore this situation touches them not only politically but also personally. This is the current situation. Now, I have never seen a survey of the public opinion, including those that are being published by the opposition. And my colleagues who are dealing with this and working on this say that there is no such public survey research in which the opposition wins the elections. Yesterday, I think on Republika, the portal, a web portal that have published some analysis with excluded Albanian votes from the score that Pendarovski would win, for example. Now we have 2 or 3 weeks, and in politics this is huge time. Everything can happen, and I cannot say that those numbers could change. But if this inertia continues with the prognosis and forecasting for the election results in the first cycle, we will face a situation in which the opposition will have to decide what to do in the second round, because most probably in the first round they will get the numbers that will not satisfy them. In the second round, the assumption is that the numbers will be even worse for them, because this effort of Mr. Bledemereka is rather correct, and most probably, in accordance with all assumptions, he will not enter the second round, and most of those votes, probably 90% of those votes, will be available to the government. Another thing is whether all of them will vote. But the point is that if they decide to vote, very small portion of them will probably decide to vote for Mrs. Gordana compared to Pendarovsky. Although generally, personally, I believe that it is good to have a reserve towards the public surveys, because everywhere in the world and in Macedonia, people extraordinarily lie. I am also a sociologist in my qualifications, and what I was able to see, what is happening 10 or 15 years in the past, you have a huge number of people who lie, not only in Macedonia, but also in the world, and act irrationally. So I'm talking about maybe more than 20% of people. But if this is monitored with all so-called accommodating techniques and prognosis, probably the first round will end with a difference that in the most minimal form will be about 20 to 30,000 votes, and in the maximum form will be 90 to 100,000 votes in favor of Pendarovsky. Now the dilemma is, what will the opposition do for the second round? Will it proceed with the elections that is obvious that they will lose, and by that they will legitimate the next president, who will not be from them, and on Mr. Pendarovsky, and on the other side we do something very virtuous, which is actually bypass the elections, circumvent them, or will decide to save their own skin, especially including the skin of the person who is now in Budapest and who is a very strong factor in the decisions made by the opposition. If you ask me, I will always go with the skin savings scenario, and in that respect we will go into the second round that we will not have successful elections. In the mildest form it will be a boycott. We will see whether it will be public or hidden. In the worst form it will be an escalation of electoral irregularities, and we will see what the quantity of them will be. But I think that soon, in the second round, we will understand that we will not be able to achieve the census, the rate, because it will be very difficult to achieve that mobilization, so that in the second round the candidate of the government will be chosen with achieving the relevant percentage. That means that Macedonia will undergo crisis, probably even in the first round, and we will see what behavior will be chosen by the opposition, because this is not a rather low time frame. You can see that they are negotiating right now the Special Public Prosecution Office. Then there is an option for Georgi Ivanov to perform abolition, and I think then there will be no law whatsoever included in this case. If one decides for the abolition, then there will be an abolition, as we have seen in the past. I think what I wanted to say is actually that there is a sort of a filthy, a dirty campaign outside of this correctness of the campaign being conducted. So when I hear the words, for example, regimes, or bloody hands, or dictators, or cartels, or criminal, and so on and so forth, all that is a bit escalating political rhetorics, which can be perhaps tolerated for political purposes, but if this is compared for something which is the preparation for the second round, I think that there is a high chance that we will have uncompleted elections, and we will see what will happen behind the curtains, taking into account all these ongoing negotiations, which means that we will cause a lot of harm to the country, which will be reflected on the negotiation date with the EU, the progress reports, and so on and so forth, which is a topic for another conference. And in that respect, we will have unfinished elections and sort of a ruined state. And especially if we have in mind that we have a leader, Mr. Zoran Zaev, who is ready to do everything to reach the objectives. And it is one productive way in terms of objective, but ultimately non-productive way in terms of political values, which are afterwards reflected on the society, inter alia with the high level of cynicism and demotivation of people to even participate at the elections. And therefore, I would like to recommend Mr. Delkovsky to make the scenarios, what are we going to do after the second round. There will be differences in terms of interpreting the constitution, because it will be unclear if we are to continue the unsuccessful elections or to have new elections. And that will actually be reflected on the break between such elections, 40 days, 60 days, and so on and so forth. And then there will be interpretation whether they will remain as the election commission, although we will need a new. And then there will be an interpretation and discussion about whether the electoral code will be changed or not. And then there will be a question whether Mr. Jafari can stay and be president for an additional term, and for how long, and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to tell you my prognosis, my forecast, without too much effects. I'm actually a liberal in my standpoints, and even without having such a political positions, things are not moving in the proper way in which the elections would be successful, unless the opposition exceeds to overcome itself, relating to its personal and political interests, and if the foreign factor, although I actually don't believe, we are still living in the illusion that the Balkans is something which is important, and I think that this is not the case for a long time ago, so I don't believe that they will have some mechanisms. So we are moving towards political crisis, of which we shall see how it will be completed in 4 or 5 weeks from now. And therefore, I believe that it is extremely important that the institutions are, up till now, functioning properly and good, because at the end of the days, it is most important that the institutions are functional, because these institutions are the backbones of the political system. And the politicians, in this or that manner, will reach some agreements that all of us will be able to comment and afterwards accept. So this is not either pessimism or optimism. I think that this is actually a realistic scenario of the situation. Thank you.
Civil Media